What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the 2023-2024 season finale of Studs and Duds, the most comprehensive NFL player review series on the internet. For those longtime viewers of the channel, I know you've been waiting for this one, so thank you for your patience. How this is going to work here for the finale, I'm going to be making 8 of these episodes over the coming weeks, doing them 4 teams at a time by division, as each division is fully eliminated from the playoffs. So we'll be getting through these in due time as the playoffs wrap up here. But before we do get started, as always, I like to let people that may be new to the series know what Studs and Duds is all about. And what you may not know is back in 2016, this channel got its start actually as a Madden channel, where I have a custom community roster where I go and edit the player ratings to be what are, in my opinion, more accurate and realistic. And then, I'd come on here and talk about what I was seeing in the games and why I made those changes. And while I no longer make Madden content on this channel, I do still do some rebuilds and stuff over on TFG Plays, my second channel, if you want to check that out. I do still make that roster and this series because it's a great way for me to do my research and stay on top of everybody around the league, but it's also a great way to convey and take a wide lens look at who the rising and falling players around the league are, who's trending up, who's maybe not playing so well for every single player around the NFL. And throughout this video, you're going to be seeing those Madden ratings going up or down. But I do want you to know that those changes do a pretty good job to reflect how I perceive these players in real life, and the changes certainly stem from me watching the film and doing my own research and analysis. But without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy. Please do hit that like button as we get into it, and let's get started. Starting off the AFC North with the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm dog watching for my parents with a different microphone, so sorry if the quality is a little less than normal. I think it's still pretty solid, but with the Bengals, who obviously here in the more second half of the year, because we ended up at week 9, pretty close to the time of that Joe Burrow injury and the entrance of Jake Browning. They gave it their fight, man, but Bengals fans, I would imagine, very excited for next season. Would have loved to see what this version of the Bengals would have looked like had they got in with Joe Burrow in the playoffs. Unfortunately, didn't play that way for my AFC Super Bowl pick before the year. Anyway, let's Studs and Duds it up, starting with the Bengals star of the season / second half of the year. And, this isn't team MVP or anything. This is just kind of their biggest riser for this portion of the season that we're looking at. Star of the season just rolls off the tongue a little bit better. Anyway, I am officially rambling. Let's talk about Jordan Battle, the rookie safety out of Alabama. Was really happy that the Bengals finally made the decision to put their free agent darling Nick Scott into a rotational role and bring up the 4th round rookie Jordan Battle. Battle was such a fun prospect in that, I'm pretty sure he started 4 years at Alabama, ran in the 4.5s, which is pretty good time for a safety. But how many starters out of 4-year starters out of Alabama with like decent speed that had good tape are falling to the 4th round? Like, he just felt like a really high floor prospect. Sure, a little stiff and not the most fluid mover and all that, but man, the second they put him out there, he was an extremely solid safety. Surprise, surprise. And I was a little frustrated that it took him this long because Nick Scott was a problem for them on the back end, and they felt like he was the veteran that could handle the coverages and all the different rotations that they like to run in Lou Anarumo's defense. Turns out Jordan Battle did that for Nick Saban, who ran an even more complicated defense in college. So no problem for Jordan Battle to come in and do just that. Was rotating up and down, strong safety, free safety, wearing all of the different hats, and did a little bit of everything at, I would say, an above average level, all capped off by a really nice interception week 18 against the Cleveland Browns. But he had a couple other pass breakups to complement that. Was a mostly secure tackler, did have some missed tackles show up at the end of the season, but still 8.1% missed tackle percentage. Pretty damn solid for a rookie safety. Also got involved in 23 defensive stops. Really was just up and down all over the field. Very solid in coverage, only credited with 1 touchdown allowed. And overall, the profile of him at Alabama definitely translated to the NFL. I don't know that he's going to be a superstar. I'm not going to say it's impossible for him, but definitely a player that could have been playing earlier in the year and is the star of the season here, really, because I think he has locked himself in as that other safety next to Dax Hill. There was a huge question mark coming into the year is if they had that guy, now they can focus elsewhere with this offseason. It's a huge luxury for them. And a late 3rd round pick, by the way, not a 4th round pick for Jordan Battle, but value and analysis stays the same. Let's talk about this offense a little bit. Obviously was a neutered version of its former self with Jake Browning in there. But hey, man, how about Jake Browning? He played very well. Looked like one of the better backups in the league. I think we learned the value of a guy that's just kind of like-minded to the starter. In that Jake Browning doesn't have all of the physical tools, doesn't have this cannon arm. He's had to learn how to pick apart defenses and quote-unquote play the position the right way. So when he's been in the same system with the continuity, with all these pieces underneath Joe Burrow, you're able to, have a pretty seamless transition in a lot of ways with Jake Browning. But that doesn't mean you don't have to give him credit. Like this is talking about my Madden roster, obviously. I didn't edit his ratings before the year because I thought he was just like a camp arm type of player. Madden agreed. They had him as a 52 overall. Like he was genuinely one of the lowest rated players in the entire game. And we have to change that. He's up to a 67 now, which is going to be up there with some of the higher rated backups in the league. So just, a very classic backup profile, like we said, not a ton of physical tools, isn't going to, push the ball downfield a ton, get a bunch of explosive starts, but very competent. They're going to feel good about having him as the backup. And I imagine they're going to be able to work this out where he is a backup for Joe Burrow for a long time. And that's a pretty good feeling to have. If he goes down for a couple games here or there, he's shown that he can win some of those. And then you've got the backup running back, Chase Brown, who was looking like another hit in, to me, what looks like a very good draft class for the Bengals. Chase Brown was a day 3 pick, a ton of explosiveness. I thought should have gone earlier because this dude was all over the field for Illinois. He was their entire offense. He had like 2,000 total yards, incredibly explosive. Had some vision questions, had some fumbling questions, and I think those are still questions here in the NFL, but there's no denying the explosiveness, and at least as a backup running back, he's awesome because as he showed, you give him a well-blocked screen or a well-blocked run, he's going to come in and be that kind of spark plug and gash you. We'll see if he turns out to be more than that in time, but for now, the signs are there that they hit a guy that can be a playmaker for them in the NFL. And then Andre Iosivas looking like another hit for the Bengals in this draft class. And I'm not going to say he's making them think twice about extending T. Higgins. I think that gap is still pretty damn wide, but with some of the flashes he's shown, being a rookie here as a 6th round pick, a guy with size, 4.43 speed, really impressive physical tools out of Princeton, the thought does creep into your mind of can this guy be a wide receiver too with Joe Burrow, whatever you think about T. Higgins. And I think there's enough intrigue there, man. I mean, he had 4 touchdowns on the year, made some really impressive grabs. It was a small sample size, just 25 targets on the year. 15 of those came in the Pittsburgh game and the Browns game in the last 3 weeks of the season. So, again, very small sample size. And even in that Steelers game where he had 4 catches for 36 yards, he did have a pair of drops, but a couple of tough contested catches on the year. I'm just saying, the tools are here, man. I think what they'll do, and we're going to talk about T. Higgins next because T is going to come down. I'll talk about why that is in a minute. But I think what they'll do here is they'll franchise tag T. Higgins. And if Iosivas really impresses, maybe they do try to save some money there with that wide receiver 2 spot and let Iosivas kind of be a poor man's T. Higgins in a lot of ways. and capitalize on other aspects of the roster. We'll see, though. We're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But T. Higgins is going to come down. He had some uncharacteristic drops. His contested catch percentage was about half of what it normally is, down into the 30 percentile, which is not what you need from T. Higgins. Had some exciting games in there as well, but the consistency just wasn't what you expect from a guy that's going to be looking to be paid $23, $24 million. I think that's part of why they're a little bit hesitant here, on top of the fact that they still got to get Jamar Chase taken care of here. And that Trey Hendrickson guy had a pretty big year, too. He's going to want another contract soon. So they definitely have some big contracts that they got to work around. I expect better from T. Higgins moving forward. I expect him to be back. And I think next year, with a healthy Joe Burrow all season long, we can see T. Higgins kind of get that big contract he deserves. But I think it's almost fortunate for the Bengals that T had a little bit of a down year, because he can't really complain too much playing on that franchise tag. And then at tight end, Tanner Hudson. I'm curious to see if they view him as their starter next year. He definitely stepped in and was fine as that kind of underneath, reliable possession tight end. Had some solid blocks on tape as well. So, I think he's good enough where they could view him as a starter and look elsewhere. Not the most dynamic player, not the biggest tight end or anything like that, but definitely had a solid season and can start, if nothing else. He's gone up 11 on the season, was a complete nobody coming into the year. And then on the offensive line, hey, shout out Cordell Volson. I have not been very kind when discussing Cordell Volson, and I think that's been justified. He has had some really rough outings in pass protection. He has arguably lost them games in weeks past, but he finished the year with his best run of pass protection on the season. He really did. And he's continued to be a solid run blocker. I think he's trending up towards, maybe being a starting caliber player for them. And that's come a long way. He has started for them. That doesn't mean he's played at a starting caliber level. So a credit to him for just continuing to work at it, looking at his weaknesses. How is he losing in pass protection? And how can he prevent those types of losses? And we haven't seen him giving up those bull rush losses that he's had, the side swiping losses against quick hitting pass rush moves that he's been getting destroyed against. It just didn't show up really in the last 6 weeks of the season. And he's definitely going to be heading into year 3 here, I would assume, as their starting left guard, building up some momentum. So you have my attention, Cordell Volson. And then talk about this rookie class looking pretty good. Myles Murphy, who was their first round pick, he barely played in the first 2+ months of the season. He didn't even have 100 snaps in the first 9 weeks of the season. But in the second half here, started to play about 20, 25, as much as 30 snaps a game by the end of the season, as Trey Hendrickson was missing some time too. And you saw the flashes of why he went in the first round. Now, I'm not going to say like he's there yet or anything, but you knew Myles Murphy was going to be a little bit of a 2 or a 3 year project. He drew a lot of Rashawn Gary comps. I didn't quite see that, but there were parallels where he's this freaky, big-bodied athlete with a lot of flashes in his bull rush that just needs to develop that skill set. And when he was playing here in the second half of the year, you saw those flashes. He ended up with about a 10% pressure rate, ended up getting 3 sacks on the season. And just watching the Bengals once or twice a game, he would come in and you would notice it because you want to see what he looks like. You'd keep your eye on him, and you can see the tools and how they're there and how it can translate to him winning at the next level. So just a good start for him. We knew the playing time wasn't going to be substantial because they have all these other guys. And you knew he was a little bit more raw, but I would say his first season was a success, and then year 2, we can expect an uptick there from Myles Murphy. And then another young player here as we move all the way back to the secondary. The linebackers, not really much to say there. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, I think we've got them fairly rated at 82 and an 80 respectively. They were very solid yet again this year, and they played pretty much all their snaps back there. There's not really much to say there. Likewise with the interior players, just kind of doing their thing there. But we've got more to talk about with the cornerback room, and Cam Taylor-Britt in year 2 he just looks the part, man. And I was wrong about Cam Taylor-Britt. I thought it was really raw. I thought he was going to have to completely rework his technique. And he hasn't. He was pretty solid in his rookie year. He was good here in year 2. Missed a lot of time. He's got to stay healthy. But, man, 5 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. Completion percentage allowed of just 53%. He's sticky. He's physical. He's fast. Very good at getting his head around, making plays on the ball, getting better in zone coverage too. Like he's just a good player, man. He looks like a good draft pick for the Bengals. And as we look forward to Chidobe Awuzie, we might as well fast forward to him for a second and stay at the outside cornerback position. It's a really big thing that Cam Taylor-Britt looks good because DJ Turner was a second-round pick, was very up and down throughout the year. But Chidobe Awuzie coming back from that injury just does not look the same. He was a bit of a goat for the Bengals, and I don't mean in a Tom Brady type of way. I mean in a like, wow, he looks cooked kind of way, and he's like losing the Bengals games type of way. He's going to hit the market. I'm very curious, like, what teams view him as, because before the injury, he was playing like a top 10 corner in the league and was this like total bargain steal of a free agent for this Bengals team. But he's going to be 29 next year, so right on that kind of regression threshold. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a 2-year, $30-something million contract. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of like a 1-year, $6 million contract. It's going to be a fascinating player to monitor here. I don't think he'll be back with the Bengals, though, because they have their replacement plans in place with those second-round picks they've spent in the last couple of years. And then Mike Hilton, man, a little bit of a slower start to his season, but he actually turned it around and had like a career year, which is really impressive considering the first month of the year that he had where he was missing a ton of tackles, was really struggling there. But gosh, from like week 6 onward, he was right there with the best slot corners in the NFL. Guys like Brian Branch. We got to put Michael Carter in that conversation. But just in terms of keeping everything in front of him, limiting how long of receptions he's allowing, being a secure tackler, cleaning everything up, just outstanding. He had a career high in defensive stops, being that dominant run defender that allows them to stay in 2 linebacker packages pretty much all game because he can come in and play close to the box and thump like a linebacker. He's a thick corner, right? But also a career low in yards per reception allowed. He had 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups. Just an outstanding season for the now 30-year-old slot corner in Cincinnati. Should be poised for another big year with the Bengals next year in the final year of that nice 4-year, $24 million contract he signed back in 2021. And then we'll wrap things up. Evan McPherson. So he did actually miss 5 out of his 12 50-plus yard field goals this year. Some kicks that he's made in the past. But other than those missed kicks, which are long-range kicks that I think can come back in the other direction in future seasons, Evan McPherson was nails. Otherwise, he made all of his extra points this year. He made all of his, basically every kick under 50 yards. He made all of his kicks. So I think you'll take that from your kicker. And he's shown in years past he can make those 50-plus yarders as well. He made 12 out of 14 in 2021, 5 out of 5 in 2022. So overall, I think Evan McPherson had an excellent season and continues his climb as one of the best kickers in the league. Okay, next up, we have the Cleveland Browns, whose star of the second half of the season, really, is Joe Flacco, comeback player of the year. Maybe a little recency bias, not giving that one to Damar Hamlin, but hey, he really did recently come on in a storm and bring the Browns into playoff relevancy. Now, it kind of came to a screeching halt in the end of that Texans game in a way that I think even a lot of Browns fans probably expected and saw coming, but it's still a run worth celebrating. It's not every year we get to see a 38, 39-year-old quarterback with the legacy of a guy like Joe Flacco, by the way, who had disappeared for 5-6 years, come in for a division rival of where he used to be good, the Ravens, and just have a ton of fun and literally, like, not just narrative-wise have fun, but on the field, the way that he was playing quarterback was just fun. He came out for a team that had lost their quarterback, obviously, with a great defense. A lot of times these teams are just going to get right into, all right, we got to just run the ball, play it safe, and trust our defense. The Browns took a different approach. They're like, we've got a quarterback that has a cannon, can throw a great deep ball. Let's just take shots, and as long as we can get some points on the board today, we trust that our defense will do their job. And it was just a ton of fun to see Flacco come out there with literally nothing to lose for this Browns team, for himself, and just put that arm at 38 or 39, whatever year he's at, and just sling it, man. He still had a cannon, made some big throws, had some huge games. Is this run probably coming to an end? Do we ever see this again from Joe Flacco? Probably not, and we're only raising him to a 69 here. I still see him as a backup caliber quarterback, but definitely worthy of a bump and one last celebration here. Now, there were a couple players on this Browns team that, just kind of taking a retrospective look back at the roster, had to come down, and, you know, with Deshaun Watson, I am going to lower him just because we still don't really know what to do with Deshaun Watson. 2-3 years removed from him playing like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. When he's played, he hasn't been that guy, and he's barely played. So it's tough. You know, personally, we have seen him play enough football at a very mediocre level that I'm comfortable lowering him again. Putting him at a 77 in terms of kind of where my expectations are heading for him heading into next year. And even at a 77, that's still better than the play he's given the Browns here in Cleveland, and still to this day living off of that resume from what he was in Houston. But the further and further we get removed from that, the more and more he just has to come out and show that he can play at a high level. He has not looked comfortable in this offense. His accuracy has been all over the map. He has made big mistakes in terms of throwing stupid balls and interceptions. Shown some flashes in terms of still being a guy that can break a ton of sacks, make stuff happen with his feet. But, you know, this is the NFL in 2023. You got to do more than just that. So we're going to lower Watson, and we'll see what he looks like next year if he plays. And then P.J. Walker as well had to come down. He was horrible in the starts that he got here in Cleveland. Just a turnover machine in Cleveland, just slinging it around, really with reckless abandonment, not in a Joe Flacco kind of way, in a mostly just throwing the ball to the opposing team kind of way. And then we are going to get some risers on this offense, other than Joe Flacco. Jerome Ford ended up putting up a nice statistical season, over 800 rushing yards. Did break like 41 tackles on the year. Definitely showed some juice, and you could see when he cleared into the second level, he is a really fast back. He's got physical tools. Now, I'm kind of talking tongue-in-cheek here because I'm not going to lie, man. For a team that has had very, I would just say, lucrative opportunities for these running backs. You look at a guy like D'Ernest Johnson here in years past. You look at how productive Nick Chubb is, and Nick Chubb's a great player, but this is a running back friendly operation, and for Ford to only have 3.9 yards per attempt, didn't even clear 1,000 yards on 214 carries. And you watch the film, and a lot of times he's running into the back of his offensive lineman. He's missing cutback lanes. He's not hitting the right gap. He's another one of these backs where you boost him up. You say, good job. You were a backup running back that produced when the starter went down. But in the NFL, a lot of guys who are kind of sitting there waiting on an opportunity like Jerome Ford has been will take this and literally run with it and look like, you know, feature backs. I don't think that was Jerome Ford. I think he's a very physically gifted player, but is missing a little bit of something between the ears in terms of vision and the skills for the running back position. And I felt that same way with him coming out of college too. So that has stayed with him. Again, a fine enough season. The numbers were good. He can be a good backup, but when a guy gets this opportunity and doesn't really shatter, expectations. It's actually, I don't want to say it's disappointing, but it feels like more often than not, backups step in and actually look pretty good. And I don't know, Ford was all right. But David Bell here at the end of year 2, third-round pick, kind of that big physical intermediate smasher of a wide receiver. Just not a very fast guy. Finally got an opportunity here at the end of year 2. And the last 2 games of the year were the best games of his career. David Bell, week 18, and in the wild card game against Houston, 12 for 12 in terms of targets to receptions, a couple touchdowns, over 100 yards. Looked the part, especially in that Houston game, coming open in the slot, making some stuff happen. So maybe a little bit of a spark to his career here heading into year 3. They certainly could use some alternative options outside of Amari Cooper to step up here. So a name to keep an eye on next year for sure. And then David Njoku, I wanted to give him more than a +2, and this is one of those situations where I think because these are Madden ratings, it doesn't fully reflect how good I think David Njoku is. So when that happens, I like to note that. A lot of times the Madden rating system does a good job to reflect kind of where I would put their overall. Sometimes with a guy like Njoku, who's such a unique player, you plug in their ratings and it's it doesn't really come out the way you wanted. And what I'm getting at here with Njoku is he still had 9 drops on this season. He still was just 11 for 24 on contested catches. Still just not a dominant hands wide receiver. He also lost 2 fumbles on the season. So some of these sort of football awareness and ball skills things that have held him back in years past are actually still there. So when you're talking about editing his Madden rating, I'm not going to just crank up his catching and that kind of stuff just so his overall goes up. But what is going up with Njoku is going to be the run after catch ability, where David Njoku was one of the most difficult players to tackle in the NFL in about the last 3 months of the season, and Cleveland really discovered that and tapped into it at a big rate. He ended up with 131 targets on the season. That was 4th in the NFL, and he ended up leading the all tight ends in yards after the catch at 625, 7.1 yards after the catch average, and led all tight ends with 23 missed tackles forced. That, by the way, if you include wide receivers, was 3rd in the NFL behind Tyreek Hill and Deebo Samuel. So, I mean, they were getting him the ball however they could. Crossing routes, screens, you name it. Just handoffs, just put the ball in the dude's hand and let him go to work. And that was something that, there were flashes of that, but not at this level. So he's a monster. He is the second best playmaker that Cleveland has, and I'm excited to see if they can continue to tap into that. But again, he left a lot of meat on the bones with all those drops and the failed contested catch opportunities. He didn't quite clear 1,000 yards on the season, and he certainly would have without all those drops. He led all tight ends in the NFL in drops. But that was a bit of a tangent, just a little behind-the-scenes details. I think David Njoku, in terms of being a weapon at the tight end position, is around the top 5 in the league, even if that overall rating in the Madden roster wouldn't necessarily say that. But Jordan Akins is going to continue to come down. He was a nice little signing, I thought, this offseason, but just didn't end up being a nice little signing. His role within the offense vanished. His blocking was horrible. He had a good year last year in Houston. I thought he'd be a nice upgrade to tight end 2 over Harrison Bryant, and he certainly was not. And then one more guy in the offense going to go up here is DeJuan Jones. I had a really good year at right tackle. Did get hurt with a couple months left to play there. And just a +1 here for DeJuan Jones, even though he was arguably the best pass-protecting tackle in this rookie class. But I liked him a lot coming out. I really liked him coming out. So he was already rated ahead of the curve for a 4th-round pick, but definitely looked the part. And I think we'll see what they do with this tackle situation. But I think DeJuan Jones certainly should be one of their starters for sure. But let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. which obviously the unit as a whole was awesome this year, but I think it was a lot of guys that I have highly rated and have high expectations for just continuing to dominate. So there's not a ton of movement here with the defense. There are actually a couple guys going down. Those interior guys, Dalvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris, the two veterans there, are actually going to come down. Dalvin Tomlinson, now 30 years old. I mean, the run defense profile just wasn't really there for him this year. It was by far the worst year of his career in terms of run defense. He's been a consistent like 25 defensive stops per season type of defensive tackle, 26 last year. He's usually getting 40 to 50 tackles every year too. And this year, with a slightly less run defense snaps, but proportionally not that much less, he had just 12 defensive stops. He had about 30 tackles. And the PFF run defense grade at a 49.2 is by far the lowest in his career too. Still an okay pass rusher, but yeah, I mean, he's got to come down one. I mean, you can't really argue with the drop in production for the 30-year-old for a Browns team that their run defense was how you were going to beat them. And then Shelby Harris as well. I don't think there was like any individual efforts where you looked at Shelby Harris and were like, oh, he's kind of holding this team back or he's not playing great or anything like that. But rated up there as a 79. He is now 33 years old. This is the second time he's been kind of a throw-in or a lowly invested player. He was a throw-in in the Russell Wilson trade. He was added here basically for free before the year. And just basically across the board, whether it's pass rush, run defense, everything's just down a tick from what Shelby Harris was in his prime. And looking back on it, it was time to just lower him a little bit. Still a nice player, but certainly not what he used to be. But on a positive note, Alex Wright, a former mid-round pick for this team out of UAB, really was a good fit in this stunting, attacking front. And, they loved to get all of these different body types moving around, twisting, running TT stunts and all that stuff. And having a guy with the length and power, or at least physical strength of a guy like Alex Wright is an asset for the Browns. So you saw him opening up some twisting lanes for other guys, but he also was able to kind of get through some of those gaps and get some pass rush production on the table for the first time in his career. So he's trending up. He's been a good fit for this D-line. Still a long way to go. Not a guy I'm really like lining up trusting to win one-on-one reps, but he is an asset for this pass rush. And then Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, what a damn year for JOK. He's like one of the most explosive playmaking linebackers in the league. He's incredibly aggressive, and it makes sense why he had a great year in an attacking, aggressive system like this in Cleveland, though it kind of bit them in the very end. But Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was fourth in the NFL in defensive stops, which is registered as a play per PFF that constitutes a loss for the offense. It's basically within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. So JOK was fourth in the NFL in those types of plays, despite being 40th in run defense. So that just goes to show you how explosive this dude is and how aggressive he is. Now, there were some moments where, say, a team like Houston in the playoffs was able to say, hey, this guy is a see-ball, hit-ball linebacker. He's never seen a play fake, a pump fake, a run fake that he doesn't love, and they were able to attack him on it. So you've got to still have a good balance schematically around that type of player, but I don't think you change what JOK does because he really is one of the most instinctive, explosive linebackers in the league. Like Patrick Queen was voted into the Pro Bowl, and with all due respect to Patrick Queen, he's a fine player. JOK is a much better version of that, like just go play aggressive, go find the ball, and make stuff happen. JOK is a much better player of that guy. Or like Quincy Williams for the Jets too. All those guys kind of play the same role as the LB2 for their teams. I know JOK is the best linebacker here, but they have Anthony Walker to theoretically be more of the disciplined, bigger-bodied type is all I really mean there. Call it the weak side linebacker. But anyway, into the secondary, again, I felt like all the guys we love in the cornerback room pretty much played up to their ratings, didn't exceed them or go below them. But in the safety room, they had some injuries in the second half of the year. Juan Thornhill and Grant Delpit were missing some time, and these two young safeties really stepped up. D'Anthony Bell out of West Florida, who's young in terms of NFL career. He's in his second year, but he is actually 26 years old. And then Ronnie Hickman, who is much younger. He's an undrafted free agent out of Ohio State. Both these guys had to play, and both just played very good football. I mean, they were mostly in positioning coverage, but not perfect, as you would expect for young players. A couple missed coverage assignments and losses on the back end, but for the most part, we're coming downhill, tackling guys, making defensive stops, making plays on the ball. I think Ronnie Hickman had 2 interceptions. So they didn't miss too much of a beat with these two safeties stepping in for a couple of good players in Juan Thornhill and Grant Delpit. So they've got some good young backups there. And then I am going to lower Rodney McLeod, my dude. I mean, I had him rated up as a 77 because I watched his tape for the Colts last year, and this dude was like legitimately a top 10 safety in the league last year. His film was so good. But you see what's happening in Cleveland. They have not been able to replicate that from the 34-year-old vet. And honestly, I think there's always a breaking point with these older safeties. It feels like where they eventually reach a point of no return where their play speed is just not good enough. I felt like his play speed was fine in Indianapolis this year, but this year, so he was a backup to start the year, but he did get into the starting lineup there right before he got hurt against the Steelers. It was like week 11 or 12. And you saw Jaylen Warren kind of burst into the second level of the defense, and you saw Rodney McLeod try to take an angle to bring him down that he normally would be able to take, but just got completely left in the dust. And you're like, yeah, that's probably it for McLeod when the angles he's been taking his whole career are all of a sudden getting broken. You're probably just losing that step that you need. So I love Rodney McLeod. It's been an incredible career for a guy that has never been the fastest guy, but probably going to be seeing his retirement this offseason. I mean, he's 34 years old, right? It's nothing wrong with that. And then the kicker, Dustin Hopkins, was nails this year. They needed him. Being more of a defensive-minded team, he was fantastic. So there are your Cleveland Browns, who certainly are going to have a lot of expectations next year to kind of get this thing truly right and take that step from being fun gimmick team with a great defense to like real championship caliber team. Looking at you, Deshaun Watson. Figure it out. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Still a fantastic season, even if they couldn't get it all done in the end. For their star of the season, not a big surprise here. We are going to go with Lamar Jackson, who has been steadily climbing throughout this season. The change to more of a pro-style offense here was a smashing success as Lamar gets his second MVP. The thing that stood out the most about Lamar, and I've said this throughout the season, but it has been the way he's just been moving in the pocket and navigating pressure, just buying time within the pocket. And it's that to me, it's not that he hasn't done it in the past, but he's taken that ability to a next level. And it's just made him so incredibly frustrating to try and defend because you're already trying to keep contain on Lamar Jackson because he will make you pay if you break contain, but he's been so good at like using that against you. And you know, your pass rush is not going to be as strong if you're contain rushing because you're not trying to get after the quarterback. You're trying to keep him inside the pocket, but eventually you're still going to try to get through. And what he's been so good at is waiting till a guy gets through and then stepping up, stepping left, stepping right, getting out of the pocket, then rolling back into it. I mean, once he's reached really elite pocket presence as he has, we saw another MVP. And then on top of that, I thought he was much more accurate with the deep ball this year than he's ever been. And his comfort within this offense in year one was really impressive from a processing and decision-making point of view. So, yeah, I mean, Lamar was fantastic. I know things didn't end the way you would have hoped, and I'm not going to lie, man, this probably would have been a plus for this time around, if not for really one of the ugliest kind of decisions I've seen from a supposedly elite MVP quarterback in a big moment in the playoffs. I mean, forcing that ball into triple coverage that gets intercepted. I know Ravens fans wanted pass interference on that play, but I genuinely don't know how an MVP quarter, like a legitimate should have won MVP quarterback, makes that decision in that moment. He wants it back, obviously. Very painful, but don't need to end on a sour note. Obviously, such a fantastic year for Lamar, who I think is entered tier 1 for NFL quarterbacks. For a while, it feels like it's been, Mahomes, Allen, Burrow. I think Lamar can certainly be put up with those guys now as we're making our quarterback tier maker videos. But let's talk about some of the other guys on the offense. Justice Hill really popped for me in the last couple months of the season, along with Keaton Mitchell, but Mitchell, again, failed to stay healthy, and Justice Hill was the one that was available as the speed back for the Ravens. Emphasis on speed, man. He has got some juice. Still not like a feature back or anything like that from a vision and just durability, ability to handle the full workload. But, man, when they get him outside on jet sweeps, and not jet sweeps, just outside runs, you can tell how incredibly explosive this player is. And it's not like they were only using him on outside runs. He can zoom up an inside gap and gash you that way too. So another one of these backs in this episode of Studs and Duds where we're talking about probably not a starter, but still a very valuable backup type. And then Keaton Mitchell, I wish this guy could stay healthy, man. I think that's a big part of why he fell in the draft. Not a terrible surprise that he's had durability concerns so early in his NFL career, wasn't really available in the preseason, finally gets back out there, week 6 or so, and honestly looks untouchable. He looks like Jahmyr Gibbs. I will say it. You can't tell a huge difference between these backs in terms of just explosiveness, contact balance. What did he have, 8.4 yards per carry on 50-something touches? It's absurd. But the volume just not there, the durability just not there. If he can ever stay healthy for a season, he could have a monster, all-pro type of season. The talent with this kid, it's incredible. And it was there in college, too. I know it was a lower level of competition, but he probably had the most incredible highlight reel out of any back in college last year, not named Bijan Robinson. So, again, just please stay healthy, Keaton Mitchell. I think that's, if a genie could come around and give Ravens fans 3 wishes, I think Keaton Mitchell staying healthy might be one of those wishes. And then another rookie here, Zay Flowers. You factor in playoffs, he had over 1,000 yards, was by far the best player in the receiving group for the Ravens. Developed a chemistry with Lamar as the year went on when he got into all those kind of play extension situations or when Lamar is buying time in the pocket. Zay really felt like he was having that high IQ ability to take a second look at the coverage and run, whether it was deep or back to Lamar or towards the sideline, wherever he had to go to get open in those spots. Really impressive. On top of course, looking like one of the better route runners in the league out the gate, one of the most fluid athletes at the wide receiver position in the league. Incredible juke move, was up there in the top 10 for missed tackles forced for wide receivers. The sky is the limit for Zay Flowers. Did just get some sort of off-field, I don't want to speculate, but I did see some kind of domestic situation, I think it was. So hopefully nothing major there, and Zay can stay on the right path here. And, he did have the fumble and the taunting penalty in the playoff game. We can't always make fun of coaches for playing the veterans and not playing exciting rookies, but also not point out when the rookies are out here making these critical mental mistakes in the playoff games. There's a reason coaches don't always trust rookies, and Zay's got to clean that type of stuff up, and had, I think, 7 or 8 drops this year. So it certainly is not all perfect with Zay Flowers, but man, it could be if he can polish and clean everything up. And then Isaiah Likely really stepped up with Mark Andrews going down. The interesting 6'2", 235-pound quasi slot receiver, quasi tight end. What a playmaker he was. He was probably the second best wide receiver for the Ravens once Mark Andrews went down. He actually, we just talked about David Njoku. The only tight end with a higher yards after the catch in the league was Isaiah Likely. And he had some really explosive plays after the catch, breaking tackles, showing some of that I didn't fully, I guess, expect him to have. But yeah, I mean, the dude's just a playmaker. He just understands playing receiver, really. Makes tough catches, runs good routes, and just continues to impress every time they call his number at a relatively high scale. Now, we do have one player going down for the Ravens here, and it's going to be Ronnie Stanley. Really, not a great year for Ronnie Stanley. Still had a lot of good starts, and I think he's still a good player. But for a guy that was really viewed as one of the maybe 3 or 5 best tackles in the league, he's dealt with this really tough recovery now from a gruesome injury that he suffered in 2020. It was about a 2-year recovery period, and was good last year. Better than he was this year, but not what he once was. So that was the first kind of like, okay, but still, you weren't really worried about it. You felt like as long as he was healthy, he was going to be pretty damn good. This year, he was healthy, but had the worst year of his career, man. To begin with, he had 10 penalties, which is very. I mean, he hadn't been close to that since his rookie year. But what's pretty crazy is if you sort by those true pass rush sets, where it's getting into your kick slide, not play action or quick sets or anything like that in quick game, he had by far his worst year. His total pressures allowed was 34. The most he had ever allowed was 23 in a season, and that was the only other year he allowed more than 20 pressures. So way more than where he's usually at. Pass block efficiency down into 91.6%. I mean, that's low-end starter territory, if not backup territory. So you pair that with the 10 penalties allowed, with the injuries, there is some major red flags on Ronnie Stanley, who is 30 years old at this point, going to be heading into his 9th season next year. So, man, offensive line is quietly a very big need for the Baltimore Ravens. The right tackle, Morgan Moses, had a great year, but he's up there in age, nearing a new contract. You got Kevin Zeitler here, who, again, was locked down as a pass protector. He had one of the best years of his career. He's really comfortable, but he's up there. He's like 34 years old. Their left guard was mediocre and is a pending free agent. So they really do have a lot to invest in, I think, on this offensive line, and they did not really see the gains from Daniel Falele in year 2 that they were hoping for either. So something to keep an eye on here this offseason as you're doing your mock drafts and thinking about the Ravens offseason. I think O-line is by far their biggest need, and I don't know what Ronnie Stanley's future really holds here. But Tyler Linderbaum, their center position, is not going to be a problem. He's been a slam dunk pick. I love how they weaponize him in the run game, get him on the move with like wide traps. Typically, if you're not being super creative, you think about guards being weaponized as pullers and sometimes tackles, but we have seen this more in the NFL lately, but you still have to be innovative in your run game to get your center on the move like that with these sweeps and wide traps and stuff, and they do that so well. But to Tyler Linderbaum's credit as well, he's added play strength, he's added weight. I think he's up about 10 good pounds since he got drafted, and I think that's being reflected in his pass block grades too. He has not been losing nearly as much. Not that he was horrible coming out the gate, but he just wasn't great at it. He's been even better at it now. So Tyler Linderbaum, I think, ascending towards discussions for like who are the best centers in the league, especially as Jason Kelce retires here. Linderbaum is heading up into that direction with towards Ragnow and Creed Humphrey. But let's talk about this defense. that in a lot of ways was the star of this team's season, along with Justin Madubuike, who I definitely thought about making the star of the season for the Ravens. There were a couple good candidates here. And Madubuike was even better in the second half. I wasn't entirely sure what to make of his hot start because you have this system that runs a lot of twists and stunts, and you were looking at production from Madubuike that was just miles ahead of what he's done in years past. He's been a good player, but he really was looking like a great player out the gate. Wasn't entirely sure if that was going to sustain, but I felt like even as the year went on, he was winning his one-on-one looks even more, getting those individual wins, being the guy that they were trying to isolate in one-on-one matchups that they could trust to win more than really anybody else on this defensive line. He was fantastic. He really balled out in a contract year, going to be a massive name to follow here this offseason, as he is a pending free agent. But, a third-round pick with an immense amount of athleticism, but was just so entirely raw coming out of Texas A&M. We knew this was kind of possible when he went to the Baltimore Ravens, who's so good at developing linemen, but it doesn't make it any less sweet to see. And this guy's going to be getting, north of $17 million a year. And I think a lot of Ravens fans are hoping it's for Baltimore. But also going up on that interior defensive line is Michael Pierce, who reminded us this year that if he can be healthy, he's one of the best nose tackles in the league. Now, that's a big if. But this year, he played twice as many snaps this year, 698 snaps, including playoffs. Twice as many snaps as he played the last 3 years. Didn't play in 2020, 251 snaps in 2021, and just 91 snaps for Baltimore last year. And I know the Minnesota Vikings are like, what the hell, Michael Pierce? You robbed us blind, giving us just 251 snaps in 2 years. And then 2 years later, you're like back to being one of the best nose tackles in the league on the cheap for the Ravens. And he's cheap again next year, by the way. He's going to be just a $2.8 million cap hit for the Ravens next year. So how valuable is that to get him back here? But Pierce had more run stops than he has had since 2017. He had a career high in pressures as well with 36 pressures. That's been a thing with Michael Pierce is because he's 6 foot 355. He's a freaking handful to block off the ball. He can generate some push and get some pressure there. So he's not just a plodding nose tackle. He really is, I would say, just to play it safe, a top 5 nose tackle in the league when healthy. It's just how many snaps are you going to get from him every year? I don't know if he's going to be able to repeat that next year for the Ravens, where he didn't miss. I'm just looking through this. I don't think he missed a single game this year. That's pretty crazy. So, what a year for Michael Pierce. And then what a year for some of these veteran edge guys. Holy buckets. I did not see this coming from either of these guys, Jadeveon Clowney and especially Kyle Van Noy. Clowney didn't quite sustain that meteoric rate he was at in the first half of the year, but was still really good down the stretch. A career year for Clowney, and a career year in pass rush win rate for Clowney too. I feel like I give guys here, I take a lot away from these guys because the scheme is so good at manufacturing pressure with how good Mike McDonald was at designing stunts and blitz looks. But Jadeveon Clowney was 9th in the NFL in pass rush win rate. So he was out there beating his matchups, getting after the quarterback on his own. Now, that is light years ahead of where he's been in his career. I have no idea where that came from. And we'll see, if he's back in Baltimore, if he gets a big payday, and if he goes somewhere else, are you chasing a career year? We see that all the time. It might just be best for everyone if Baltimore can somehow get him back on a mid-range 2 or 3 year deal. I just don't know how realistic that's going to be after the year he had. He's going to be another interesting name to follow here. But then Kyle Van Noy, this one is even more surprising than Jadeveon Clowney. Van Noy, who's been this kind of hybrid tweener linebacker, going back to his time in Detroit, New England, and Miami, where he's just been kind of one of those Belichickian style linebackers, a little bit of run defense, a little bit of pass rush, a little bit of coverage, doing everything at an above average level. I'm not going to say he hasn't shown that this type of pass rusher is in there. He did in 2019 for New England have 60 pressures and 8 sacks, but then teams were chasing that type of production for the next 3 seasons. Miami, New England again, and then the Chargers, when they brought him in, all were sort of chasing this high-end pass rusher that he was in 2019, but in 3 different spots. He was just a good pass rusher, but nothing psychotic. This year gets back to 53 pressures, 9 sacks on just 376 pass rush snaps. So, typically you're looking like a good baseline is about a 10% pressure rate. And again, Van Noy had 53 pressures on 376 pass rush snaps. So you're looking at 15% or so there. That's towards the higher end in the league. He was insanely efficient when he played, and they really started to count on him as the season went on. And he's another player where I don't know what you do with that. I don't know if you pay that. When we saw this 4 years ago, he flashed a huge season and then wasn't that guy, especially at his age. But I guess just tip your cap to Kyle Van Noy for coming here to Baltimore and being a monster. I will say, if the Ravens can't get these guys back, or if they do get them back and they don't repeat these kind of outlier years for them, we could see a pretty major dip in the Ravens pass rush production. It's all going to be something very interesting to monitor, is if the Ravens, especially without Mike McDonald, can repeat the type of pass rush they got this year. And I don't mean to pile on Ravens fans, but that's part of why losing this year is such a gut punch, because you don't know if you're going to get 30-year-old edge rushers to have career years. You don't know if Michael Pierce is going to stay healthy. You won't have Justin Madubuike playing for $2 million. There's never a guarantee that you get back to that spot. Now, one area that I think they will be able to clear up some money, or at least redistribute some money, is at linebacker. I know Patrick Queen had a great year and somehow got voted into the Pro Bowl, but man, Trenton Simpson was a 3rd-round pick, an entirely raw but uber athletic, insanely athletic linebacker. Ran like a 4.39 out of Clemson and moves like a freaking running back out there. But just had no idea what he was doing at the linebacker position. He ends up getting drafted in the 3rd round, and he goes to the Ravens, right, who are like as good at developing defensive players as anyone in the league, and really didn't have to play. They had Patrick Queen, they had Roquan Smith, they had Kyle Hamilton. They had no need to play him throughout the year, but in that Week 18 performance against Pittsburgh, where they were starting to sit some starters, they put Trenton Simpson out there, and he looked like a new man. Like, he was flying to the ball. He looked incredible, and he only played about half of their snaps in that game. But I honestly think he may have shown enough for them to say, this guy can do the Patrick Queen stuff just as good as Patrick Queen next year, and they can let someone else pay Patrick Queen, get that 3rd-round comp pick, and keep that pipeline coming here with this Ravens defense. He looks really exciting. I wasn't the biggest Trenton Simpson guy, but the second he went to the Ravens, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to be wrong about him in 3 years, because they're going to make him work. But then you get to the secondary, and these corners were pretty solid. Brandon Stevens got a lot of hype this year, and he's interesting. He was targeted more than any cornerback in all of the NFL. He ended up allowing 8th in total yards allowed. So that's you do the math, you're like, that's pretty solid. You get targeted more than anybody else, and you're 8th in yards allowed. That means you did a pretty good job holding up throw by throw. Now he is getting targeted a lot. That means quarterbacks thought they had good looks entering his coverage. And he certainly had very up and down weeks throughout the year. I do not think he's like a perfect corner. I'm not even convinced that he's like a true number 2 corner at this point, but he was very solid over the course of the season and deserves some praise for it. Then you got the veteran Arthur Maulet, played kind of a dime corner role for them in the slot, more of a strong safety than a slot corner there for Arthur Maulet. But he would come in again, in their dime packages where you have 3 safeties and 3 corners, he would come in. Not much of a coverage player, but an excellent blitzer, really physical, tough vet that they liked a lot of the stuff they could do with him. And for that role, he definitely made some plays for them. And then Ronald Darby really had to step up this year because Marlon Humphrey only played about half the year and missed a ton of time down the stretch. And Darby's, when he's healthy, he can play, man. He was probably the most reliable corner the Ravens had this year. Snap in, snap out, not named Marlon Humphrey. Just so much zone experience at this point. Coming from that Vic Fangio defense in Denver, they run a lot of similar coverage structures in Baltimore. They've actually been a very zone-centric team under Mike Macdonald, and I think Ronald Darby was really comfortable there. He was able to stay healthy and had a nice year. He could be a nice signing for someone, honestly. I thought he had a nice bounce-back year. Could be a nice signing for the Ravens, too, if they're able to get him back on the cheap. Still just 30 years old. Like, he's not ancient age-wise, even though he's heading into year 10 in his NFL career. Was really young coming into the league. But then Kyle Hamilton, the safety slot corner bandit player, I really think we need a new positional terminology just for Kyle Hamilton, because he's not a safety, he's not a slot corner, he's not a linebacker, he's all of them. If you want his splits, Hamilton played 58 snaps essentially as an edge rusher, lined up off the edge, probably showing blitz there is how he would be charted as that, but that's, he's not covering anybody. He's just lined up off the edge. 58 snaps there. 236 snaps as a box player, which is either a true box strong safety or a linebacker. 465 snaps as a slot corner, which is the most position he's played. Ended up getting moved out wide as a wide cornerback for 5 snaps. And then 301 snaps as a free safety, but just 39 of those 301 snaps as a single high free safety. So if he's playing a deep safety, almost all of the time he's playing a 2-shell, either quarters or cover 2 type of look, or he's buzzing down. So he moves all over the place, needless to say. But I really think my pro comp for him being Spider-Man is just the most silly but accurate pro comp I've ever had, because he just floats around that sort of 10-yard area. And whether he's blitzing or tracking down a screen or floating and trying to, cut off quick game, or throws into the short to intermediate part of the field, or break to the outside and cover an out route or a corner route, whatever he's doing in that part of the field, he is elite. His wingspan, and most importantly, his anticipation and his mind for the game. Like, yes, he's this unique, lanky athlete, but it's much more about his brain and the way that he just kind of reads the quarterback's eyes. They've put him in this position where he can gamble, and it's not going to compromise the integrity of the rest of the play, because if you bust on a hook zone, or you gamble and end up at a position there, they're going to have Roquan and all these other players ready to rally and make up for it. And because he is so smart, he's usually gambling correctly. So he's so fun, man. And I try not to get wrapped up in where do you rank Kyle Hamilton amidst safeties, because he's such a unique football player. He plays his own position that no one else is really playing. So I guess he's both the best and worst at his position group in the league. But yeah, man, he has gone to the perfect spot to utilize his skill set. It's a credit to Kyle Hamilton, but it's also a credit to this coaching staff for taking this really unique player who someone might have taken him and said, we want you to just be a free safety, or we want you to just be like Jamal Adams. We want you to just be a strong safety, hang out in that area. A lot of teams would have done that with Kyle Hamilton, and I don't think you would have gotten this version of him where he's just got like LeBron James box score stats every week with like 6 tackles, a sack, a pass breakup, forced fumble. I mean, the closest player that he reminds me of is like Troy Polamalu. Granted, I was so much younger and don't have a great memory of kind of all the different ways they use Troy Polamalu, but just those crazy instincts and ability to see the game faster than a lot of other players. Granted, I was looking this up and I tweeted about this. Troy Polamalu ran a 4.33. That like scares me just to think about. But that's a good transition, I guess, to the Steelers here. The punter, by the way, Jordan Stout, is going to go up, the young punter. But yeah, let's transition to the team that Troy Polamalu used to play for here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we'll start on the offensive side of the ball with the Steelers. Their star of the season is going to be Jaylen Warren, the quasi-starter, really just kind of a split backfield him with Najee Harris and Warren, who both finished strong. It's a bit of a thunder and lightning because I think Warren is a little bit more electric, but Warren has some thunder about him. He's 5'8", 215 pounds. That's a stocky build. He's kind of a sawed-off shotgun coming at you, and he's got a lot of different ways to kind of make you miss or run through arm tackles. He's got relatively quick feet with a nice jump cut, so he's got some like elusiveness in that sense, but again, at that size, 5'8", 215, like, don't let his height fool you. Like, he's got a decent amount, not a decent amount, he's got a good amount of contact balance. He's got a stiff arm, he'll truck through contact. So it's not just thunder and lightning. It's kind of thunder and quicker hitting thunder with these two guys. But either way, Jaylen Warren is definitely a starting caliber running back, even if, you know, he hasn't hit 1,000 yards and he's got Najee Harris here with him. I can promise you this. Arthur Smith coming in as the offensive coordinator. He loves himself a 2-man backfield, and that's going to continue here in Pittsburgh. Let's talk about Najee while we're at it. Down the list, a spot there, but Najee's also going to go up. Obviously, Jaylen Warren kind of, I don't know if I want to say he stole the show this year, but he was the hot new thing and is a little bit more electric, but look, Najee Harris also was a critical part of the Steelers kind of going on this run, making the playoffs, especially when you look at like that Ravens game when Warren was, you know, he fumbled the ball, he's a smaller back. They can turn to Najee in a lot more of these like grounded out situations. He is that guy with the first round pedigree, the size. He can really churn out tough yardage. And I know he's had some frustrating moments being a former first-round pick. He hasn't really reached that superstar status that you really hope a running back that you spent a first-round pick on will. But that doesn't mean he isn't a damn good back. And I also understand, like, he's got some frustrating vision moments where whether it's not seeing a hole or trying to kick things outside, like, he definitely has his imperfections, but I'm still a big fan of Najee Harris's game, and he deserves to go up as well. Let's talk about Mason Rudolph. Very valiant effort to step in and I suppose help this team win games. They end up riding the hot hand through the season. Look, he's still a backup quarterback. He played really well in that Seattle game. I'll give him a tip of the cap. He hung in there, made some really big throws. The Steelers needed that game, and they went and got it done. And I think they enjoyed really his ability to push the ball downfield a little bit more than what Kenny Pickett was showing. Ability to take some of those more shot plays, but still, man, he puts the ball in harm's way. He offers nothing with his feet. It's not like he's got a cannon for an arm. He's fine. He's a very good backup, deserves to go up and some praise. The reason I'm kind of talking tongue-in-cheek here is I still, like, I know it's controversial, but I would have just gone back to Kenny Pickett in that playoff game because you've created this weird situation where Kenny Pickett was healthy and you played Mason Rudolph instead, who stunk it up in that game against the Bills, and you lost. just as you knew what was going to happen when you played Mason Rudolph, you might as well play Kenny Pickett and see how he performs in a playoff game, right? The other thing is, like, this all happened right off the back of them firing Matt Canada, and they put Pickett in there in the first game without Canada against the Browns defense, which we know how good that unit is. Then he comes out against the Bengals, plays pretty well, and gets hurt. And then Mason Rudolph comes in with the new offensive coordinator, and the offense looks better. But I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, why would you not go back to Kenny Pickett, who I get is not like some great, maybe even franchise quarterback, but he is the guy you spent a first-round pick on. You fired the offensive coordinator to make him look better and then didn't even go to him. I just, riding the hot hand with Mason Rudolph was just questionable to me. And I think with hindsight, maybe people agree with that a little bit more. I know I said that in the moment, and people are like, you have to play Mason Rudolph. They're winning with him. And I'm like, yeah, they're winning with him. They're not winning because of him. Anyway, he's going up. He looked like a good solid backup, but just like most solid backups, you're going to get some good starts, you're going to get some bad starts. Another big part of the Steelers' run was George Pickens, who continues to get better. Had that little hiccup moment in the middle of the season with the whole run blocking thing and him being a little bit more checked out. But turns out winning cures all wounds. And as soon as this team started winning games, George Pickens was much more dialed in. And I mean, he had some monster games this season and on this winning streak. 195 yards on 4 catches against the Bengals. The catch and run touchdown that he had, showing off some speed after the catch that I'm not going to say I didn't know he had, but it was definitely a little eye-opening with him kind of pulling away from that Bengals secondary, and then was huge in that Seahawks game that we mentioned. 7 catches for 131 yards. Definitely not a perfect season from George Pickens. I still think there is a long way for him to go because I think Pickens has the potential to be what my pro comp for him coming out was, which was AJ Green. Like, he has the physical tools to do that. And because this is talking about a Madden roster, I've said this before, he has a 99 spectacular catch rating for me. I think he is the best receiver in the league at that individual trait to elevate, make sensational catches, body control in the air, through contact, at the sideline. Yet, his contested catch percentage this year is 32%. Just 8 out of 25 on his contested catches. So I still think he can be better in terms of fighting through contact and being more dominant as that, go-get-it wide receiver. And then just in terms of like route running and stuff, I feel like a little bit more attention to detail, a little bit more physicality to fight through press coverage and physical grabby NFL coverage would benefit him. But still, he had almost 1,200 yards on the season, including that Bills playoff game where he put up another 50. And he's definitely trending up and could be due for a monster season next year if Arthur Smith wants to use his best playmakers and give him targets. And then on the offensive line, first-round pick Broderick Jones entered the lineup here about a third of the way through the year and certainly looked the part of a freaky first-round pick that they invested in. I think especially as a run blocker, some of his down blocks, his ability to just clear out the D-line, like you can see the traits there, the athletic ability. I'm excited to see him as well in a wide zone blocking scheme under Arthur Smith, where I think he can weaponize Broderick Jones. So I think he's definitely trending in the right direction. From a pass blocking perspective, he was fine. Definitely was, I would just say, due for some up and down moments based on his college tape. Like, he was just very raw as a pass protector. And at first, it didn't seem like that was going to be a huge issue, but down the stretch, he really did have some pretty rough outings as a pass protector. The Colts game, the Ravens game, the Bills playoff game. He gave up a total of 13 pressures in those 3 games alone. That's a lot. So, yeah, he definitely has more development to do as a pass blocker, but I would say overall he made the Steelers look pretty good for that draft pick and pretty good for putting him in there at right tackle. But on the other hand, the Steelers do have a bit of a center need as they head into the offseason. The magic pixie duck dust with Mason Cole has kind of run out here with the Steelers. They were able to get by with him here for almost 2 seasons, but down the stretch here, teams were really finding ways to isolate him as a pass-protecting center and recognizing him as a huge weak link on the inside of that line. And, if you can show a blitz or, just rush 5 or do whatever, run a stunt, find a way to get someone matched up on Mason Cole. He's an undersized center that doesn't have the best play strength, doesn't have the best technique as a pass protector, and he was really a problem for them for a large part of the season. So I would expect that they will try something different there at that center position next season. But let's talk about this defense. There's just not a lot of movement on the Steelers' defense. It's a lot of the usual suspects, great edge rush, and just adequate secondary with a bunch of familiar bodies. But there are some names to talk about here. Keanu Benton, the second-round rookie. Really, we're going to have 3 of their defensive rookies in this outstanding draft class that the Steelers had, with Herbig and Porter coming up. But yeah, Benton was really solid all year long. Wasn't really a full-time starter, was seeing pretty consistently about 30, 35 snaps a game. They have a huge rotation with that group up front. But he definitely held up as a rookie defensive tackle, which, as we're seeing more and more of these days, like, this seems like the position that maybe is the hardest for these guys to step in and be good right away. So for him to just be solid is certainly impressive. But he had some big pass rush wins down the stretch in the last month of the season. Was really starting to break out that pass rushing profile that we saw at Wisconsin. That was only, again, on like 10 to 15 pass rush snaps a game. So you're not seeing like monster dominant defensive performances from him where he's coming out, getting after the quarterback 30 times a game, getting 5-6 pressures. He hasn't really gotten that opportunity to show that he's that guy yet. But at least rotating in off the bench, ended up with 7 big pressures in the last month of the season, 24 total pressures on the year, just that 1 sack. But he did hit the quarterback 7 times. And then from a run defense perspective, he held up okay, I would say. And I think got better as the year went on. Ended up with 18 defensive stops on the year. Pretty solid there. So, yeah, I think Benton looked the part and deserves even more playing time next year. But one of these guys, a part of this rotation that just kept making maybe 1, 2, 3 splash plays every week on his, in his rotational role, 10, 15 snaps a game, Armon Watts, really all year long. And, Watts, if you go back 2 years ago for the Vikings, had some traits. He had like 30-something pressures in a season as a day 3 pick. He had a great first step coming out of Arkansas. He's a really athletic defensive tackle, but for whatever reason, teams just haven't really wanted to keep him around. The Vikings' new regime came in and cut him. The Bears picked him up, didn't get too much out of him. And the Steelers are like, yeah, we'll take a still relatively young defensive tackle with a lightning-quick first step. And they were able to weaponize him. As a run defender, just kind of lining him up as a 3 technique, be that penetrator. They've always had that role for that guy. And then as a pass rusher as well, Armon Watts had 17 pressures on just 155 pass rush snaps. That's a very good pressure rate. So, just limited opportunities, obviously, but the kid can play. I wonder if he might be due for a larger role with the Steelers or someone else anytime soon, because he seems to be growing to me. And then we mentioned, this rookie class is looking really promising. We got 2 more defensive rookies going up here. Nick Herbig, there's only so many snaps to go around when you're playing behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, the game's best edge rushing duo. And even Marcus Golden had a decent year for the Steelers too. So he was the 4th guy here, but he forced himself into the lineup, and man, he made plays. He, just as he did at Wisconsin with that lightning quick first step, a really nice kind of pass rushing profile with his skill set, really active hands and a relentless approach. Kind of a Steelers type here, and he comes in maybe 10, 15 snaps a game. Where have you heard that before? I don't know, the last 5 minutes here. They love their rotation here in Pittsburgh, but man, he was efficient in the workload that he got, the very small workload. I think he only had like 83 pass rush snaps this year, but 10 pressures on those looks, 3 sacks, including really the game-winning sack against the Seahawks with like 7 minutes left. He gets the kind of TJ Watt play where he fights through a chip block, a double team, rips through the tackle, ends up getting a strip sack that sets the Steelers up in Seahawks territory, up 7 with 7 minutes to go. So like a huge moment in the Steelers season rather, was thanks to Nick Herbig. So I don't know when and if he's ever going to get significant playing time here in Pittsburgh, because for the course of this rookie contract here, he's probably going to be behind Watt and Highsmith. But, there's a world where we're talking about Nick Herbig as like the best third edge guy in the league. We're getting way ahead of ourselves, but man, he had the skill set. And when he went to the Steelers, it was like they just found another one of these guys, didn't they? I really like Nick Herbig. He's got the bloodlines too, brothers in the NFL. And then Joey Porter Jr., the last guy we're going to talk about here for the Steelers and for this video, going up again here. He's gone up 3 in his rookie season. And I just don't have words to explain how the hell he was available in the second round. I thought he was a top 15 player in last year's draft class. I thought he was an incredibly pro-ready cornerback with some of the best press coverage ability that I've ever seen for a cornerback, like right behind Sauce Gardner. Among maybe some other guys that I'm forgetting, but that's been there out the gate. And then really the one weakness for Joey Porter in college has been a weakness in the NFL. He was penalized 12 times. He is an incredibly grabby player. He quote-unquote cheats out there, but it's going to lead to you really not giving up a lot of yards and being really sticky in coverage, because they're not going to call that every single snap. Now, is that annoying to go against? Yes, but that's the point. That's why you draft Joey Porter. And in time, I expect that he'll get better with his route anticipation and not be quite as grabby. I mean, every young corner is grabby. Joey Porter's just a little extra grabby. But yeah, I mean, Joey Porter is fantastic. He's a number one corner for the Steelers and trending in the right direction right away. You didn't need a draft analyst to tell you that Joey Porter Jr. going to the Steelers was probably going to work out pretty damn well, and so far so good. And that is going to do it for today's division. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please hit that like button on the way out. It does help me out. Let me know in the comments down below where you agree. Which players do you disagree or think I omitted from your favorite teams? Let me know all of it in the comments down below. But until next time, peace out.